What's up, metal and heavy music fans? Today we are ranking black metal sophomore albums. So there are a lot of great albums here, and I'm going to split the tiers up a little bit different. As you can see, I added an extra level from the last one, and there's really nothing here below a C, I would say. And even the ones at a C are still pretty decent. But let's just get into it. The last list we ended with Enslaved, and I think it feels appropriate to go ahead and start with it on this one. So we've got Frost, and it's S tier again. I'm kind of biased because Enslaved is still like my favorite black metal band overall out of all of these. But every era is just so good, and of their early stuff, Frost definitely stands tall in terms of perfectly capturing its name and its album art. It just feels very cold to listen to, but very engaging. Takes all the things that were great about the debut, but then kind of like boils it down to its most important properties. And you've got more songs on here, but they're shorter and more to the point, and it's just very effective. Fantastic album. All right, then we got Emperor with Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk, and this is always like a divisive one. I say there's like a civil war between people who say, is Nightside the better album or is Anthems the better album? I am a Nightside person myself, but I also love Anthems. Like, they're both fantastic albums. To me, this one is A tier. It's just a little bit below Nightside for me. I'm not even exactly sure what it is. I feel like something about the atmosphere, the production, it's a little bit different. There's a few songs on here that I don't like as much too, which I can't say about Nightside, which I enjoy all the way through. So yeah, it's fantastic, stellar album, and a lot of people would put it at S tier, but there's going to be a lot of other albums that I'm going to be wanting to put up there too. So that's just my take. You can let me know down in the comments, why do you feel like Anthems is maybe the superior one? Then we got Dark Funeral with Vobiscum Satanas. Now, this feels kind of like a continuation of the debut, just a little bit tighter. We got a different vocalist on this one from the first one, too. And I do prefer the vocals on this one. Like, it sounds a lot better. Some slight improvements to the production, too, which, speaking of in the Nightside Eclipse, I think it captures a little bit of that vibe. I'm not like head over heels for it. It's not like the best things ever, but there are definitely some high points on it, like Thy Legions Come, which has kind of a dissection energy to it, as well as Evil Prevail and Ineffable King of Darkness. Pretty solid outing. I appreciate how focused it is too at 35 minutes. Not my like favorite on this very strong list though, so I'm gonna put it at B-. And we got Burzum with Etsom Engang. I find some of this album to be honestly kind of annoying, like the vocals in particular. I think in the first half, it's like they still hadn't really, or I should say he, Varg hadn't like fully found his sound yet completely on this one. And it doesn't get more atmospheric kind of until the second half with songs like Ham Som Reiste, Nar Hamelin Klarner, and Svarte Troner, which I'm going to mispronounce a lot of stuff in this video, so be ready for that. So yeah, I think it does get better in the latter part of the album, but I still definitely prefer the next album, and especially Philosophem overall. And as far as this list is concerned, it's one of my least favorites to re-listen to. Not bad by any means, again, but not a big thing either for me. Then we got Dimmu Borgir with Stormblåst, and I actually, by the way, really love the remake. Like, I think they did a fantastic job with that. And as far as some of their more recent albums, it's up there. Like, it's a really good remake. I'm generally against remakes, but that one is really good. In fact, I should add it to my list I'm kind of compiling on those. But yeah, this version too, quite good. Good atmosphere, some pretty memorable songs, some keyboard parts that were stolen that are not on the new version for that reason. So there's that. But yeah, Dimmu Borgir was one of my earlier introductions to this genre, so I'll always have a soft spot for them. I think they're a great gateway band. And I think they hold up. I think a lot of their albums hold up. A lot of varied opinions on them. I'm going to put this one at B+. All right, Ulver with Kveldssanger. And so this is a stunning album with lots of... It's mostly like an acoustic album with a lot of like folky harmonized singing. There's some like a cappella moments that are super captivating. You can honestly scarcely call this a black metal album at all, because there's no harsh vocals, really. There's like not really distortion. Like, it's just straight up more of like an acoustic folk album, but I love it. And I just think it's beautiful. And right from the beginning, Ulver showing that they are not a band to be tied to any particular sound. So I'm going to put it at A tier. Mayhem, Grand Declaration of War. So big improvement, I would say, from the first album. Like leaps and bounds better. Still got some issues, but already getting a lot more cinematic with the intro on this one. The songs feel a lot tighter, more focused in their aggression, and the spoken word is a little bit corny, but the vocals in general are the weakest point on this album. I'd say, fortunately, they let the instrumentation do most of the talking. Like, there are some pretty substantial sections of this album without vocals, and those tend to be the best parts, in my opinion. And whenever the vocals come in, that's when I start to be kind of like, it's all right. So, an improvement, but still definitely, in my mind, not some of their best material. Mixed bag for me. I'm going to put it at B-. All right, another absolute classic here. We've got Immortal with Pure Holocaust. As far as the early classic second wave albums go with the kind of rougher production, this is definitely one of my favorites. Like, it's classic for a reason. There's so many just like memorable little earworm kind of just tones to the guitar. This was definitely an album when I was trying to transition from the more modern kind of produced black metal stuff to the classics. This was very helpful for me. Like, something about it, along with some of the Bathory albums and a few other things, like this helped me kind of finally make that click, because it can be a little rough, like not for everyone, but I think for a lot of people, getting into stuff like Darkthrone and early Immortal and Burzum, like it takes some doing, and this album really got me there, and it still holds up. Like, songs pop up on my phone when I'm just shuffling stuff, and I don't tend to skip these. Start to finish, really strong. Love that classic, just black and white cover, something so stark and magical about it. I'm going to put it at S tier. All right, Sacramentum. And by the way, I was really happy for those of you who watched the debut albums tier list. I had a few comments from people who said, wow, I've never heard of Sacramentum. I'm so glad you pointed this out to me. And those are my favorite comments on these videos. I'm so happy that people got into them. And this was a pleasant one for me because I'd only really paid attention to the Sacramentum debut. I have not listened to The Coming of Chaos. At least I hadn't until before I prepared for this. And another really strong one. Like, this one's a bit more aggressive, and I feel like the contrast in the cover arts alone like already do a good job of kind of prepping the listener for the different vibes on this one, because the other one has that like chill dark blue icy look to it, and this one's just like fire. And there's definitely some of that coming through in the music. Still got those classic kind of melodic death metal guitar lines, which I really appreciate, which is appropriate to their Swedish origins too. Very consistent, gets me banging my head, and I really enjoy the atmosphere on this one. Honestly, I'd say it's almost on par with Dissection's best material, so I'm going to put it at A tier. All right, and speaking of Bathory, we've got The Return of Darkness and Evil, another album that, for whatever reason, I haven't listened to as much as some of the other ones. I have, but for some reason I tend to like skip from the debut over to the third album and then Bloodfire Death and Hammerheart, and this one just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. I don't know why, because it's really good. Great atmosphere, again. You're going to hear that phrase a lot on this video. I'd say moving more out of the kind of overall thrash sound of the debut in favor of a more pure black metal sound. Very simple album, but also very effective. I definitely do prefer Bloodfire Death of this era overall. That's my personal favorite, but really good stuff. I'm going to put this one at B+. Carpathian Forest, another band that I haven't really spent a lot of time with, and I'm kicking myself for it because I'm really enjoying these albums. And this time we've got Strange Old Brew. It's Carpathian, doing Carpathian, fast, violent, to the point. Definitely hard leaning into that Bathory sound, but also with some really fun bass guitar, which you don't always get on these earlier black metal albums. some decent dynamics too. There's even some piano and saxophone that add to the performance, as well as maintaining that rock and roll swagger though, which is the overall thing that I think I really love about Carpathian Forest and just this style of black metal. It seems like it would be really fun for like a concert to see live. I would really enjoy that. Just a grim, fun time. Another B+, and I'd put it pretty high at that. Gorgoroth, Antichrist. So I have a soft spot for the early Gorgoroth albums, especially the first 3, and then also some of the mid-career stuff too. Not my favorite black metal band, but this early stuff is just so aggressive. Like, it was another one alongside Pure Holocaust that helped me get into early second wave black metal, and this is definitely one of those. It's not their best. It's still no Under the Sign of Hell, but it's working its way towards that sound, and I just love how just violent and unhinged it sounds. So I'm going to put this one at A tier. Rotting Christ, non-Serviam. So much better than the debut. I know I kind of shafted them a bit on that one, mostly because I did not like the vocals. This one has much better vocals, like kind of more of that classic black metal kind of raspy snarl coming through here that I think fits the music a lot better. And then you're actually hearing more of those classic Rotting Christ melodies starting to come through in an early form. Again, it's no A Dead Poem yet, but it's like inching its way over to that. Really amazing atmosphere as a result, very solid, and it's a unique listen too. Like when I was going through all these, a lot of them had a lot of similarities. This album kind of like stands out. It's a little bit different, and I definitely give it extra points for that. I'm going to put it at B+. Ooh, Borknagar, the Olden Domain. Another big album that helped me get into this era of the black metal sound. It's so good. Like, their debut is really strong, and I ranked that one high too, but this is even better. Like, to me, this is the best Borknagar album I see. A lot of people tend to agree with me on that, which is saying a lot because they have a pretty strong discography. They've had a lot of different talented members over the years, but this one they've like fully embraced like the folk end of their sound. The debut is a little bit more like straight kind of raw black metal with some of those elements, but here like you get a lot more of like the folky clean singing. I feel like it becomes more of a centerpiece to their overall style, and it just has this timeless quality to it that takes you to another time and place, and I absolutely adore it. It's going to be pretty high up on S tier. Satyricon with Vite Chris Dod. Again, probably not even close. I'm trying. Another tough one here because there are lots of good things going on this album with the mix of hellfire aggression, symphonic elements, and acoustic breaks, but I wouldn't say it's as memorable as Dark Medieval Times or Nemesis Divina, which it's kind of like mashed between those two albums. And also, just by comparison, I don't like it as much as some of these other ones. I was getting a little bored in places, quite frankly, when I was giving it another listen. So, despite having some really strong moments, and some people seem to like this album more than the debut, which was a little bit surprising for me when I looked up the scores on Metal Storm, because I think Dark Medieval Times is like pretty much flawless, and this one is a pretty significant dip for me. So I'm going to put it at C tier, but again, even the C tier albums on this list have a lot of strengths. Darkthrone, Under a Funeral Moon. So the main trilogy, so to speak, of Darkthrone albums are definitely my favorites. Under a Funeral Moon is kind of sandwiched between two albums that I like more. I prefer Transylvanian Hunger and Blaze in the Northern Sky, but this one's it's strong too. It's actually the only album too that Fenris officially says is like a black metal album, which is interesting. Again, I can't say enough. Listen to his commentaries for these albums. They're very intriguing because he's very specific in his mind of what black metal is and is not. And he says Blaze is still more of like a death metal album to him. And he even said Transylvanian Hunger isn't exactly like a black metal album. This one is. He says it's just got that like icy cold production, that minimalist approach. And it's good, but not my favorite. It's definitely a classic. It's definitely among my favorites of their discography. It's just a little bit weaker to me overall than those other two albums. So I'm going to put this one at A-. Alright, Samael, Blood Ritual. So this album has so much attitude to it that it's perfectly amplified too by the reverb in the production. It just really gets me bobbing my head. Very nihilistic sounding. Just makes me want to put on that classic black metal frown while I was listening to it. Just a lot of like, like that was the vibe of this one. And proof that faster is not always heavier, because this is a super heavy album, but it is slow, methodically marching to annihilation. Now, subjectively, on the other side of that, it is a little bit of a problem for me since I'm more into the faster stuff, and there are a lot of like kind of doomier moments here that it delves into. Still really strong, but if I'm thinking about albums I want to like re-listen to more and more, I put this one probably at the higher end of B-. Alright, Cradle of Filth, Dusk and Her Embrace. Always a controversial pick to include on any of these black metal lists to the purists out there, but to me, at least this album is definitely a black metal album, and it's a really strong one too. I was hard on the debut, because again, I think the production, the vocals, a lot of it is kind of like half-baked, in my opinion, doesn't sound as good. This is a great album. It's one of the few albums I own a hard copy of from Cradle of Filth. I actually really enjoy the stuff that, the last 3 albums or so have been some of their best, in my opinion. But as far as this, like, classic, more stark sound, this one is just stunning. Like, it's got such a great, there's that word again, atmosphere, that really surrounds you. It's got that sort of romanticism to it as well, but not over the top yet, which would happen with some of their other albums. And just all around, great listen to go back to over and over again. I'm going to put this one at B+. Alright, Vindir with Arntor. Not my favorite Vindir album still. I am partial to 1184 and Lickford. I think that's where they really mastered this sound, but very strong album. If you want black metal with really great melodies and again, kind of like a folky swing to it, you can't get much better than Vindir. Like, very signature style that the minute you hear it, you immediately know who it is, if you're familiar with them, of course. A band I feel like a lot of people also like kind of sleep on, so I encourage you, check out their whole discography, because it's a short one, but one that is very rewarding nonetheless. I'm going to put this one at A-. Alright, Marduk, for those of the Unlight. So I'm more of an Opus Nocturne fan myself overall, but this is definitely a classic in its own right. Album cover, again, like perfect black metal, just encapsulation of that sound and what you're getting from here. It reminds me of the like ring wraiths from Lord of the Rings, which I'm a nerd for that stuff. So the drum sound is also just like mammoth. It just echoes through the recording space, and they did a great job like capturing this just kind of very imposing sound, very menacing melodies from the guitars too. It's another one I'm going to put up pretty high on A-. And you know what? I'm actually going to bump up Carpathian Forest. Like, I don't know, just something about that one really, really stuck with me, and I'm even going to move it up on the tier. Last but certainly not least, we have Dissection with Storm of the Light's Bane, which I mentioned on the last tier list. I like the Somberlane, but this is where it's at. Like, this is a classic, and again, as somebody who also loves and came up on melodic death metal, especially Swedish melodic death metal, this is kind of like the best of both worlds, right? You've got this Swedish black metal band bringing a lot of those same kind of Gothenburg sounding melodies and harmonies, but with an even darker, more menacing, more insidious kind of aesthetic. And it's fantastic. Like, what else can I say? It is just a kind of one of those like almost perfect albums that gives me everything that I want from both genres in one package. So it's got to be S tier. Y'all let me know how you would rank these albums down in the comments. What's your favorite, least favorite, and why? Check out this playlist for even more metal tier list, and check out this video for part 1 for the debut albums if you missed it. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.